Since 1896, Rainier has been a leader in the tent industry. Rainier strives to look for new ways to build and provide cost-effective fabric structures, tenting supplies, and equipment. Our goal is to save you time and money every time you set up one of our fabric structures. Throughout this DVD, we will provide simple step-by-step instructions on how to assemble your Maximizer 40-foot wide gable end frame tent. The majority of the concepts and instructions are easily applied to tents of other sizes or styles. If you have any questions regarding the installation, maintenance, or disassembly of your tent, please call Rainier at 800-621-2495. For safety reasons, Rainier wants to remind the installer not to erect the tent during bad weather, and to please follow all safety procedures during the installation process. Partially assembled tents are like large sails in windy conditions, and precautions must be taken during installation to avoid an accident. For example, an important safety reminder is to always tie off the frames before installing the fabric tops. Please contact all utility companies for underground services. In many states, the utilities work together and have formed a utilities location service. It is your responsibility to locate all underground services, including speaking to the owner about irrigation, pool, and other special services the property owner may have installed. Before you begin the installation process, you must complete a site survey. The major purpose of doing a site survey is to accomplish 5 crucial items. Number 1, to gather all the important information regarding the event. Number 2, to ensure that the proper equipment is specified for the event. Number 3, to organize the information so that it becomes meaningful for the success of the event. Number 4, to serve as a permanent record of the entire transaction. And number 5, to ensure that all codes and regulations are met for the event. The tools needed for assembly and installation of the 40-foot frame tent include the following: a minimum of 1 6-foot step ladder. If your tent has long legs, using an 8-foot or 10-foot ladder may be best. You'll need 2 pole ropes, each 75 feet long by 5/8 of an inch in diameter. You'll also need a 3rd pole rope of smaller diameter for a return rope. A sledgehammer or power driving equipment for driving tent stakes. You'll also need general hand tools. You'll need keeter feeders for fabric installation, a minimum of 2 tent jacks for a 40x40, and 1 additional jack for each 15-foot or 20-foot of the middle sections. And at last but not least, you'll need to include measuring tapes, layout string, chalk or spray paint, and stake pullers for dismantling. And lastly, ground cloths to protect the tops during installation and dismantling. It's a good idea to write these items down. Most of these items have been pre-assembled in the Maximizer install kit available from Rainier. And don't forget your own personal protective equipment such as hard hats, gloves, boots, and safety goggles. Whenever you're installing a tent frame, you always want to assemble the tent frame components starting at one end and working toward the other end. You never want to start in the middle. With the Maximizer tube system, once the roof portion of the frame is assembled and is setting on the ground, there are 3 options for installing the fabric. The first and recommended installation method is to lift the frame, install the tent legs, anchor the tent, and then install the fabric roof panels. The second option, and the more conventional method, is to install the fabric panels with the roof frame on the ground and then lift the complete unit to install the legs. The third and final option is to install part of the panels on the ground and the rest once you have the frame up on its legs. We will be showing you some of these options in this video, but the focus is on installing the roof panels after the frame is up on its legs. With gable end tents, the best and safest method is to install the gable end panels with the frame on the ground, and then raise the frame and install all the roof panels in the air. Lay out the general size by measuring and marking the ground surface that the tent will be placed on. Make sure your layout is square. Establish which side of the tent frame is to be raised first. To have the tent located in the right position when finished, you must lay out and assemble the frame parts about 2 feet inside the first side you plan to raise. Now lay out the maxi tubes and connectors for the perimeter of the tent. Frames with maxi tube 4, 116 tube, and catenary tops require that eave tubes be installed in a vertical position, making the lower track of the eave tube available for roller walls. It's important to note that early models of maxi tube and tops that strap onto the eaves will need to use the following procedure. Check all side perimeter maxi tubes to be sure they are positioned correctly to match the 26-degree roof pitch when installed. The tube must have a pinhole drilled through the score line on the upside of the tube. If the hole doesn't have a line through it, the eave tube is upside down and needs to be rotated 180 degrees. When installing this style of eave tube, use a 1/4-inch bail pin instead of a quick pin to avoid damaging the fabric. It's also equally important to mention that the quick pins or bail pins need to face away from the direction that the fabric will be pulled into the frame. The purpose is to eliminate any pin edges from catching on the fabric and damaging it. First, assemble the rafter sections of one gable end. Connect the Maxi 2 rafter to the Maxi track end crown. Slide both parts together and pin with a 3/8-inch bail pin. Assemble the other side in the same manner. Next, attach the gable corners to the ends of the rafters and pin with a 3/8-inch bail pin. Install the gable end upright at the crown and bolt it in place with the eye bolt of the roof cable set. Insert the eye bolt through the plate and the gable upright, affixing the two together. The eye bolt should be on the inside of the tent and in a horizontal position when complete. To complete the end rafter assembly, the last step is to add the gable eave tubes. Start by sliding the gable eave connector onto the upright and bolt it in place with a 3/8-inch by 3.5-inch long bolt and a nut. The connector is in the correct position when the arrow on the fitting is to the inside of the tent and pointing up. Slip the eave tubes onto this fitting first. Then onto the corner connector and bolt with both ends with a 3/8-inch by 2.5-inch long bolt and a nut with the threads to the inside of the tent. For the 40-foot wide tent, use the second hole out on the eave tube at the gable eave connector. At the corners, use the hole closest to the corner on the fitting. It will be necessary to move the rafters in and out to achieve this assembly. Connect the ridge to the rotating spigot on one side of the crown, using a quick pin. It may require one person to hold up the end rafter to keep it from binding at the crown. The direction of this pin will determine which direction the fabric tops will be pulled into the tent. Be consistent with the direction of this pin along the entire ridge. This part of the assembly is best done with a crew of 3 or more. Place the arch with the gable corners at the desired location, pick up the arch and rotate it to the upright position. Having 3 people makes this process a lot easier. One person on the ridge tube pushes while the other 2 lift, the arch starting near the middle and working out as the arch rotates into upright position. Take caution. Once the gable end arch is upright, one person must steady it until the next step is complete. Attach the perimeter eave tubes of the frame consisting of maxi tubes in the appropriate size for the first bay width. Then pin with a quick pin or with 1/4-inch bail pins. The pins along the eave tubes should always be pointing to the inside of the tent. The most common first bay is 15 feet wide, requiring 14 feet 4-inch maxi tubes. Once the eave tube is on both gable corners, the frame should remain upright by itself, leaning into the direction of the rest of the tent assembly. Midsections typically come in 10-foot, 15-foot, and 20-foot sizes and may be different from bay to bay for the particular tent you are installing. For 10-foot midsections, use 9-foot 4-inch tubes at the ridge and eaves. For 15-foot midsections, use 14 feet 4-inch tubes at the ridge and eaves. And for 20-foot midsections, use 19 feet 4-inch tubes at the ridge and eaves. If there are midsections in the tent being installed, the assembly of the second arch will generally be laying away from the first arch in the direction the tent is being installed. Start with the MaxiTrack 4-way crown and slide on the rafter and pin it with a 3/8 inch bail pin. Install the second rafter and pin. Next, install the brace bar between the rafters, sliding one end into the function slot and pin with a 3/8 inch bail pin. Slide the other end into the opposite rafter and pin. This will require moving the rafter in and out until the holes line up for pinning. Now install the intermediate eave connectors in the ends of the rafters and pin with a 3/8 inch bail pin. Then install the 40-foot cross cable to the hitch rail of the intermediate eave connector with the Clevis pins provided. An important note is if you are using scissor truss cables, install them now in place of the typical cross cable. Connect the short legs of the cable in the rafter holes below the brace bar using a 3/8 inch bail pin. Next, connect the other end of the cable to the hitch rail on the intermediate eave connector. Lastly, connect the final leg of the cable to the opposite side eave connector. It will be necessary to push the rafter ends inward to connect either the cross cables or the scissor truss cables. This is a designed preload. Because this is the second arch from either end, it will require a set of roof cables. Bolt the eye bolt of the 40-foot roof cable set into the crown lower plate, with the cables trailing in the direction of the gable end arch. The eye bolt should be in the horizontal position. When long frames of 5 or more mid-bays are between bays, another roof cable set should be added, leaving no more than 4 consecutive bays without roof cables. Install the next ridge tube on the crown of the arch you just assembled. Raising this arch is similar to the first, but you must be ready. This requires a ladder being placed where the second arch will top out. Raise the arch by hand as shown here. Working from a ladder, lift the ridge tube of the first arch and connect the tube to the crown of the second arch and pin it with a quick pin, noting the direction of the pin for pulling tops. Then connect the perimeter of the tent by sliding the intermediate eave connectors onto the maxi eave tubes and securing it with a quick pin or with a 1/4 inch bail pin. We will now secure the roof cables in the first bay. If needed, loosen the turnbuckle so 1 to 2 inches of thread is showing on the inside of both ends of the turnbuckle as shown. Connect the turnbuckle end of the roof cable to the hitch rail on the eave connector. Tighten the turnbuckles, adjusting as you go to square the tent section. The squareness of the bay is best observed from the side by looking at how vertical the arches appear. These roof cables are only in the first and last bay unless your tent is more than 6 bays long. Continue assembling, raising and attaching the midsection arches until complete. Depending on the size of your install crew, you may gain efficiency by having part of the crew assembling the arches ahead of the other crew members who are attaching the eave tubes. An alternate method of raising arches is shown here. Using this method, attach the eave tubes to the standing arch. Assemble the new arch on the ground with the peak pointing away from the previous arch, and the rafter ends against the standing arch. Attach the ridge tube to the crown fitting of the new arch. With 3 or more people, lift the peak of the newly assembled arch and connect the ridge tube coming off the standing arch to the crown fitting of the arch being lifted. Lift and walk the ends of the rafters away from the standing arch. Lifting the new arch into position, set the new arch down at the end of the installed eave tubes and attach them to the intermediate fittings with quick pins. This method of raising arches has the advantage of not requiring anyone to go up a ladder to connect the ridge tube to the crown fitting. As you complete the frame, it will get stiffer and harder to connect. It may be necessary to stop and straighten or square the frame during the assembly. When all midsections are finished, assemble the last gable end of the frame using the same steps and parts used for the first arch assembly. Remember, the last bay in the tent structure needs to have a set of roof cables to provide stability in the roof plane. You may also choose to install the rafter end of the leg-to-rafter brace bar at this time, saving you one trip up the ladder at each leg if you wait to do it when the frame is off the ground. The end of the brace bar fits into the function slot of the rafter and pins with a 3/8" bail pin. Check all the connections and fittings to be sure the frame is ready to install the tent tops. This is also a good time to double check that all quick pins are facing the same way at the ridge and to the inside at the eaves. This important step ensures that when fabric is installed, it will not catch on the pins or tear the fabric tops. Lay out the ground cover cloths to the outside of the gable end eave line of the tent. The cloth should be large enough to protect the entire width of the fabric panel being installed. We have found that a drop cloth that is 24 feet by 8 feet is an ideal size. Place the gable end infill panel on the ground cover and roll it out along the length of the tent frame. It is always easiest to install the gable end fabric while the frame is on the ground. Gable end infill panels are 2 pieces with a typical tent lacer down the center. This must be closed after the panels are installed in the rafters. It will require one person to guide the fabric as it enters the rafter. The fabric can be pulled in by connecting a rope to the pull loop at the top corner of each panel and by pulling it from the long angle. When both panels are in place, join the lacer down the center of the gable infill, closing the Velcro rain flap as you go. Repeat these steps at the other gable end. We recommend putting the roof panels on after the legs have been installed. We feel this method is safer because the crew will be lifting much less weight and the tent is less likely to catch the wind during the lifting process. Preparation is very important at this time to ensure safe lifting. Install anchoring points to hold down the tent while it is being raised. The minimum is 1 anchor point at each corner of the tent. Drive a tent stake out about 4 feet from the frame location and attach a tie-down strap or rope between the frame and the stake. Prior to lifting, you need to remember to pre-assemble the legs with the base plates and distribute them around the tent at needed points. When the leg is properly assembled, the function slot of the leg is to be on the inside of the tent and the hitch rail of the base plate is to be on the outside of the tent. Legs are attached to the base plate with a 3/8" bail pin or a 3/8" by 2 1/2" bolt. The keter cutout for inserting ketered sidewall is about 36 inches from the ground, and there should be 3 holes in the leg above this cutout. Some installers leave the base plate permanently installed to the leg in order to save this assembly time. It is important to mention that before lifting the frame, you should always install any special attachments needed for your event on the frame. This includes special pickup connectors for tent liners, lights, and other accessories that may be installed later. Trying to add these items on a fully installed tent frame requires the use of tall ladders and is potentially unsafe. For safety reasons, remember that wind conditions can and will lift an entire tent. Proceed with extreme caution and always lift the top surface into the wind stream. Place the jacks at or near the corners and connection points. The rule is to pick up the frame within 3 feet of a connector. Never pick up a tent from the middle of an eave tube. Put the slings around the perimeter eave maxi tube and operate the winch until the slack is taken up on all jacks. Working as a team, crank the jacks to raise the tent side evenly. Lift until you are above leg height. Then, install the leg with the base plate already attached to the eave fitting and pin immediately with a 3/8 inch bail pin. Also install the leg to rafter brace at this time, pinning it into the desired location. Now lower the tent, slowly reverse the jack cranks until the full weight of the tent is on its legs. The final lifting process is from the opposite side. Place the jacks at the corners and evenly distribute them along the long side in the same way. Attach the slings and remove the slack by cranking all the jacks. Then, working as a team, crank the jacks to lift the tent up until the legs slip on. Immediately pin the legs, then install the leg to the rafter braces. You'll be setting the tent on its legs by reversing the jacks. Gable end legs are 6 inches shorter than regular legs with 3 holes drilled at the bottom. This leg requires an 18-inch or taller base plate and will allow for adjustments to fit the terrain once the leg is installed. You typically do not need to use a jack to install this leg. Install the gable end legs at the end of the tent. Start with the leg inside of the tent and at a slight angle. Push up and out until the leg slips onto the connector. Bolt or pin in a typical manner. Adjust the base plate for the terrain and pin with a 3/8 inch bail pin. With the legs installed, we now need to anchor the tent with tent stakes. On the 40-foot tent, 2 long tent stakes, each 1 inch in diameter by 42 inches, are ideal for each base plate when staked in lawns. Anchoring properly is necessary for safe tent installation. Out guys are highly recommended and necessary if you are required to meet full wind loads of the building codes. Refer to industry tent staking guides if there is any question about how to safely anchor your tent. Throw the 2 pole ropes over the top of the frame, being careful not to hit someone on the crew with the carabiner on the other end of the rope. Connect the carabiner on the pole rope to the large O-rings of the catenary tops, or to the large webbing loops connected to the Keter web at the corners of the fabric panel. Now connect the smaller return rope to one of the rings or loops on the tops, leaving it loose on the ground. Loop the eave strap of the leading edge of the top over the buckle to prevent it from catching on something while it is being pulled over the tent. With 2 people working as a team, they will pull on the ropes from outside the frame at the opposite side of the tent from the fabric. 1 or 2 others will insert the fabric Keter edges into the top rails of the Keter track in the maxi tube rafter and will guide the fabric into the frame. The use of Keter feeders will enable easier and more efficient fabric insertions by aligning the Keter in the tops with the Keter track in the rafter. They can also help prevent tearing the fabric tops that can occur at the end of the rafter. Working slowly and pulling evenly, the crew on the ropes needs to pull the fabric panels up over the top, down the other side. If the fabric catches, immediately stop pulling and back it up by pulling it back in the other direction. Check all Keter tracks and connectors to be sure they are open, clear, and lined up. Then pull again. Stop pulling when the keter bullets are lined up with the end of the keter track in the rafter. Be sure to connect the eave straps to the eave tube at each side of the roof panel to hold the fabric in place until they are tightened in later steps. Remove the pull ropes and return rope from the top that was just installed. Move the return rope to the next open bay. Attach the pull ropes to the return rope and pull on the return rope, drawing the pull ropes back over the top of the tent to be used for the next roof panel. Use of the return rope in this manner prevents the crew from needing to throw the rope back over the top for every bay, wasting time and effort, especially on larger tents or tents with tall legs. Continue down the tent, installing tops using the same procedure, making sure to attach the eave straps on each roof panel. You can connect the tension straps at any rafter location where adjoining top panels have been installed. The tops and maxi tube frames work exceedingly well because of their design. The top tension that is applied directly to the keter web edge of the roof panels seals the roof in the rafter track. Once all tops or two adjoining tops have been installed, it's time to tension the top using the ratchet straps. Begin the tensioning process on the eave line where the end section and the first mid sections meet on one side of the tent. Connect the sling strap, which is tethered to the top of the ratchet strap, through the O-ring of the top and then through the O-ring of the top next to it. The ends of the sling strap are then reconnected to the carabiner. The sling strap should look like a triangle pointing to the ground. The other end of the ratchet strap needs to be connected to the hitch rail of the base plate as shown. Using the ratchet, tighten the tops until the keter is just beginning to show outside of the keter rafter. The keter on both sides of the top panel should be fairly even. If not, it will be necessary to pull the tops into this position, loosening and retightening the eave straps as needed to hold them in place until the top is tightened in position. Repeat this procedure on the opposite side, then at each of the other midsections until the tops are evenly tensioned. Next, move to the end leg and pull the corners of the gable end panel around the end leg and connect the O-rings of the catenary tops to the end panel O-rings, making a triangle with the webbing loop at the top of the ratchet strap as before. Tighten the strap with the ratchets. In the center of the 40-foot gable, it is also necessary to use a roof tension strap to connect the center of the two gable end panels to the leg. The goal is to get all the tops on square and firmly provide an even tension at all points. The eave straps in the middle of each section are then firmed up for final tightness. The next step, if needed for your event, is to add sidewall and/or other accessories such as FiberTech tent doors to complete the installation. Now that you've spent all that hard work assembling the tent, it's time to take it down. The first thing you want to do is remove all the sidewalls and doors and pack them up as needed. Then remove the top panels, unbuckle all the belts, and check all the pins and clips to be sure they won't cut or snag the top panels. Always remove the top by pulling on through, traveling the same direction as when installed. Using drop cloths, pull out one panel at a time, reefing into a long ribbon of fabric about 4 feet wide. Roll the fabric from one end of the other and bag them up. Complete all sections using bags marked for the appropriate sizes. Here are 4 useful tips to help you pack up your tent properly. Tip number 1, always rebuckle the buckle straps on the trailing edge of the top panel. This will greatly reduce the chance of the buckles getting caught in the ridge rafters or roof cables as the tops are being removed. Tip number 2. Always use ground covers when removing top panels. This will prevent the tops from becoming soiled during the removal process. Tip number 3. Pulling gently but firmly will lay the top down in a manageable fashion. If it is pulled too hard, it will fall quickly off the frame and prevent you from getting a nice, smooth, even fold. Unless the gable end panels slide out of the frame, lay them together as a pair, or roll, or fold in a manner that allows for easy reuse. Put them into bags marked for gable ends. Prepare to lower the frame using the tent jacks. Inspect the tent carefully to make sure no pins have fallen out or are missing. Placing the jacks about 1 foot away from the frames, follow the installing procedure in reverse. Lower the frame one side at a time. When raising the first side, be sure to lift the tent high enough to remove the gable end legs. Start disassembly of the roof frame at one end and proceed to the other end. This concludes the instructional video. If you have any more questions in regards to the proper assembly procedures for our tents, please refer to the installation manual provided with the product or call Rainier directly at 800-621-2495. Please stay tuned for a couple other important messages. Rainier is not responsible for damages that occur in shipment, weather-related damage, damage caused by incorrect use of the product, damage resulting from not using proper ground cloths, nor damage resulting from use of washing machines. UPS shipment. The customer is responsible for immediately inspecting merchandise and noting any damage directly with UPS. UPS will then pick up for inspection. Do not destroy or throw out shipping container or merchandise. If UPS determines merchandise was damaged in shipment, they will contact shipper to settle the claim. It is important that you also notify the shipper or manufacturer of any shipment damage. Credit will be issued as soon as the claim is settled. Motor freight. Rainier is not responsible for products damaged or lost in transit. The customer is responsible for noting any damages or shortages with the freight company upon delivery. Ownership of shipment passes to customer once it is loaded onto the truck. The customer must initiate a claim with the freight company and note the damage and or shortages on the freight bill, so customer can protect their right of claim. Concealed damage must be discovered within 10 days of the claims made with the freight carrier. It is your responsibility to count and open all products immediately. When you sign a freight bill of lading, without noting damage or shortage, you have accepted the shipment as is and complete.